Hello, everyone. So, this is going to be a video on trans rights, arguing in favor of them being a subset of human rights. Now, I'll talk about why I'm making this video. I have recently become more involved in the trans community, just knowing more trans and genderqueer and such people. And apparently, there are not enough cisgender voices standing up for trans rights. And I, as a cis man, have never spoken out because I felt unwelcome and demonized by elements of the LGBT community just for being a cis man, especially a cis white man. I'm actually mixed race, but I present as white. So, as a cis white man, I just figured it wasn't my position to say anything. But that isn't true because they need cis allies and they need cis voices because they're a tiny percent of the population and not enough people advocate for trans rights. So I wanted to kind of explain where transgender people are coming from the perspective of a cis white guy who was raised conservative. So this is actually take two of the video. I had one attempt. I showed it to my friend and we were going to make some slight changes to the terms I use and things. So I kind of wanted to restructure the video. I want to start with how traditional people, anti-trans people react when they see, for example, a trans woman. For people not familiar with the terms, a trans woman is somebody who was born biologically male and assigned the male sex at birth, but identifies as female. That's a trans woman, and a trans man is somebody who was born biologically female but identifies as a male. So basically, you refer to them in terms of what they identify as. Now, I'm going to use throughout this video trans women just as an example. So, a male to female transitioning person. So, I was raised with traditional religious conservative values. And I understand and have felt and was raised with the sort of unthinking, almost visceral disgust you feel when you look at what you see and what looks to you like a man behaving and acting like a woman. It could be the way they dress, it could be the way they act, it could be what they tell you they are. But you just have this reaction of like, that's not something you can change. I understand that because I used to be like that when I was a teenager, when I was 15, 16, before I reforged my values after thinking about it. So, from the anti trans perspective, a man can't become a woman. Um, just like you can't dress up like a cat and no longer be human, you can't dress up like a woman or act like a woman and no longer be a man. That's how they feel. That's the way they see the world. And the way I got past that was to question why I really felt that way. Now, one element of it I think is a misunderstanding where anti-trans people feel like they are being forced to deny reality and accommodate delusions. I've heard before, we don't accommodate the delusions of schizophrenics. Why do we accommodate the delusions of trans people? If a man thinks they're a woman, they are delusional, and I don't want to accommodate those delusions. That's how anti-trans people think. And I think that that's a misunderstanding. Seriously, you are not being asked to deny reality or accommodate delusions. You're not. What do I mean by that? Well, a trans woman is very acutely aware that they don't have a biologically female body. They know that. That's why they're in a lot of pain, because they know they're in the wrong body. So they're not delusional in a way a schizophrenic is delusional. They don't have a disconnect with reality. And they especially don't because they've done studies on transgender people. And if you take a transgender woman and you analyze their brain will look like a woman's brain, not a man's brain. So they quite literally and physically are a woman in a man's body. They quite literally are. They have a woman mind, a woman's soul, and a biologically male body. And they know that. So there's no delusion you're being asked to accommodate. Now, why are you being asked to treat them as a woman and refer to them as a woman? Well, because that is what lets them affirm themselves and feel comfortable in their own skin as much as they can be. And it makes them feel okay. It makes them feel better than if society just rejects them and tells them to stay male and present as male. So, why does transgender care exist, guys? Why does it exist? Well, you cannot take a trans woman and turn them into a cisgender male. You can't do that. It just doesn't work like that. Their brains are different. It's a real thing. It's not imagined. So, a doctor is not going to try to do that, because if you try to, it's like putting a gay person through conversion therapy. It's going to fail and it's going to cause them to commit suicide. That's what will happen. Or at least want to commit suicide or have other severe mental health distress. Doctors are not trying to put people in distress, they're trying to help them. And what helps trans people? Gender affirming care. That's why I believe not only should it exist, but it should be covered by health insurance, because it's what makes the person with gender dysphoria feel better. And what is medicine for if not to make people feel better? So the doctor, when they give gender affirming care to a trans person, they're not trying to make some philosophical statement about this being exactly the same as a biological female. They're just trying to help the person. And you can help the person too by treating them and accepting them as a woman. Now, My personal limit is I have a hard time. I'm not physically attracted to trans women, but I am attracted to biological females. So I'm like your traditional cisgender straight guy. And it's hard for me to feel the same level of attraction for a trans woman as I do a cis woman. And, you know, if I was called a bigot for that, I would fight against it. Because, you know, um, it's just, you know, it's who I'm attracted to. Like, what can I do about that, right? So I don't think anybody's actually asking you to think that they're literally exactly the same. Trans people know that they're not cis women. They don't call themselves cis women. They call themselves trans women. So you don't have to feel like people are forcing you to accommodate delusions. They're not. And there are also some misperceptions about how transgender acceptance works. Like, for example, there are people out there who think, like, in regards to the sports issue, there are people out there who think that I could just go to USC tomorrow and be like, hey, I've decided I'm a woman. Put me on the women's sports team. And they'll say, okay, and throw me on the women's sports team because I identify as a woman now. And then I kick everyone's ass. But that's not how it works, and that's not what's happening. I'm not going to go into a billion little details, but it's much, 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 much harder than that to get on a women's sports team. I couldn't just walk up and be like, yo, I identify as female, put me on the female team, and let me kick everyone's ass. It doesn't work like that. So yeah. Anyways, there's a lot of propaganda. Like, for example, also, minors are not getting their dicks chopped off. That doesn't happen either. So there's a lot of misconceptions and slander and propaganda out there. But as far as that visceral reaction that you have to to if you look at somebody and to you they look masculine and they look like what you've been raised to believe a man should look like, but they're wearing a dress, but they're saying they're female, but they have long hair, but they have a hairpin and wear makeup, I would invite you to question why you feel offended by that. Why? And for me, I've determined that the only reason I'm offended by a quote unquote man in a dress, or the only reason I was offended, is because I was raised with certain traditional cultural norms that are based on conformity and control of people's behavior. To me, it's no different than when women first started wearing business garb and going to work. People were disgusted. They felt like those women were acting like men. That's unwomanly. You are a woman, you belong with a dress in the kitchen, not in the voting booth, and certainly not in the workplace. I see it as just the next iteration of that. And think about two men holding hands, right? In 1950, you see two men holding hands, you have that same disgust, you have that same almost visceral disgust that traditional people are currently raised with in regards to trans. You're not, I feel like less and less people are being taught to be viscerally repulsed by two men holding hands. A lot of people still are, but it's getting more accepted. Whereas trans has kind of been left behind, where it's still okay to be repulsed. Even just by, I mean, even drag queens are having a hard time getting accepted, okay? So even just regular cross dressers have a hard time getting accepted. A full on trans person has an even harder time as getting accepted as a woman. Now, in my opinion, people should oppose all traditional values. As long as it doesn't involve hurting other people, we should break traditional values. As long as it doesn't involve hurting other people. Why do I say that? Well, where would we be if we never broke traditional values? Where would we be? We would be in. Oh, hold on. People are talking. I'm going to move into a quiet area so that there is not background noise in my video, and I don't want to have to do a third take because that would be annoying. All right, quiet space. Oh, all right. No more background voices, in case you heard any. Okay, where was I? So, I would invite you, please, to think about the fact, first of all, a trans person is not identifying that way for fun. They are subjected to horrible, horrible prejudice, horrible violence, threats of violence. The amount of stories that trans people have in regards to the way society treats them are absolutely appalling and horrifying. They're treated horribly. Horribly. Why would a person subject themselves to that kind of hell just for fun? Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna become trans. It seems cool. Nobody does that because you're subjected to terrible, terrible things for adhering to that identity. So they just are the way they are. They have one gender's brain and another gender's body, one gender's soul and another gender's body. And it's not for fun. So why do I think I have always since I got rid of those prejudices I was raised with, I've always really, really admired trans people. Because what are trans people? They are people who affirm themselves. They are people who say yes to expressing themselves, despite the fact that they're going to be hated for it. Those are the most valuable humans in all of society. Because if we didn't have people who were willing to affirm themselves and be who they want to be despite cultural pressure, we would still be in before the Dark Ages. We'd still be in Egyptian times. We'd be before that. Even the Egyptians, even Cleopatra challenged gender norms. So imagine if we didn't have anybody who tries to break barriers. Trans people are brave and they are valuable. And they should be supported. You don't have to accommodate any delusion. I promise. No trans person has ever given me heat for not accommodating a delusion. So to me, you know, when I see a trans person, I think there is somebody who is challenging traditional norms. And they're brave enough to do that despite the way they're going to be treated. And once again, what's more valuable than that? I mean, that's what Rosa Parks did, right? You refuse to fit in a box. Traditions put people in boxes, and people don't belong in boxes. We're humans. We're meant to express ourselves and be what we are. And we should always be trying to be better than our ancestors. I hate the concept of tradition because animals are like their ancestors. Humans should be better than their ancestors. We should forge new values. And treating trans people in a way that makes them commit suicide or hate themselves is not a good traditional value. It's just there because somebody wanted to control somebody else a long time ago. That's the only reason. So remember that trans people aren't doing it for fun, and that people like them who refuse to fit in society's boxes have traditionally been the people who, or historically, been the people who actually make a damn difference in the world. So I celebrate trans people, and whatever they ask me to do, the only thing I won't do is fuck them, okay? If they want to say, you have to fuck me the way you would fuck a woman, that's the only time I'm like, I can't do that. But besides that, I want to make them feel like they are women and be accepted in female spaces. Trans women, I'm talking about. Because that's what lets them affirm themselves and feel better and feel comfortable in their own skin. And that's what I want for everybody. So yeah, I guess I'll kind of leave it at that because the video is already at 22:40. Um, I hope that I can get through to somebody at least. The main thing that I want you to do is question why you feel repulsed by trans people. Analyze that repulsion and question whether or not it's the same as the repulsion people felt by two men holding hands. And if it's not, then I would be interested to hear your arguments because I haven't heard a good one for why it's different. All right, cool. Thank you.